Hi, this is Bob Papa, voice of the New York Football Giants, and this is the Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast.
Welcome back, Giants fans, to the latest edition of the Big Blue UK and Ireland podcast in association with Andy's Man Club. Lads, remember, it is okay to talk. This episode, we are, as you can see, 66% British, 33% Irish, but as always, 100% Giants. Dan is working tonight. However, here with me for this packed episode is Kev and our resident Germany squatter, Shane. Boys, how are we doing? Are we all right?
Yeah, not bad. It's kind of like the wonder of returns. It's been a while since I've been on a live podcast. So, firstly, my apologies to the listeners not been involved over pretty much the last month. It feels like obviously we had our off-season break, and then obviously I've jumped off to Germany several times, and I'm still out here now. Just on that topic, I am on the hotel Wi-Fi tonight, which everyone knows is not always reliable. So, apologies if I do sort of drop in and drop out at any point. But, it's great to be back on with you two. Pity Dan couldn't be with us, but obviously I did talk to Dan the other night when we did the episode. I can't remember what it is, not because it's been a long week of alcohol. I just can't remember Friday. But, yeah, it is good to be back on and, look forward to getting involved into this episode.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad to have you back. I'm glad there's three of us on this evening. And I will just say something as well. I will say now, good luck to you boys on Sunday night. I know some people who have been jokes back and forward about, me supporting everyone who England's playing. But, if people don't know, my wife is actually English. She's a massive football fan. She's a season ticket holder at Tottenham. And just seeing her enjoying all this tournament has been pretty cool, to be fair. So I will just get that out of the way now, lads. I'm not saying I'll be rooting for you, but I'll give you good luck anyway on Sunday.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Obviously, some real good friends of the show, Azeez and Ruben, are both from Spain's fair shores. We will keep it civil between us, I'm sure, because we've got a lot of love for those guys. But
at least we'll keep it civil in the public domain, we'll say.
Yes, yeah. Like handshakes all round in front of the cameras, but. Yeah, Munich, Ruben might be a bit a bit testy. It's hilarious as well because the contingent of UK regulars aren't here tonight, so I'm sure that me and Shane will get a lot of hate in the comments from all of our Welsh, Irish, and Scottish fans. So we'll have to take that on the chin. But we're in the final. Now, before we begin, if you're watching this on YouTube or on X or on Twitch now, please do join in with the conversation in the comments. It's always great when we get you guys involved. Subscribe if you haven't already and give this video a thumbs up. Now, I don't think there's anywhere we can start other than Hard Knocks. So I guess Shane, well, no, not Shane, it's over to me, sorry. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go through everything and then I'll just throw a few questions out there to you and to everyone who's watching. If you've been able to watch it, then obviously do get involved. If you haven't, reach out to us. There are a few ways that we do know that you can get hold of it to watch. So we'll start off with rookie scouting. That was a big part. Obviously, episode 2, massively influenced by the combine. So there's going to be a lot of combine and a lot of draft chat here. So majority of the episode was focused on, like I said, the combine. And by extension, our scouts got to be front and center, which I thought was really nice to see some content from people that you probably don't know exist and you just know them by a static image on the Giants website. So it was nice to get a little bit of insight from them. First up, we saw the scouts in the war room presenting the main quarterback and wide receivers to the Giant brass. But it was interesting because there was no tape and there was no talk about stats or plays. It was focused on the mental attributes with a view of what needed to be spoken about during the combine interviews. Just some interesting things we get your thoughts on, guys. Blaze Bell, one of the scouts, mentioned Caleb Williams' handling of media, especially in his final 6 games of the season, where USC lost 5 of their last 6, essentially. And during that time, Williams refused to do media, which is obviously worrying in a market like New York. Do you reckon, obviously Caleb was never an option, Kev, but do you think that would have been a big decision for the Giants brass if he was an option, considering how poorly he kind of managed the media?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think one of the reasons why they do like Daniel Jones, although he's been marred by injuries, is his demeanor and the way he handles the New York media and stuff like that. And from watching both of these episodes, it really comes across like they mention it quite a lot about all numerous players about being in the New York market. Like it seems like quite a big sort of emphasis that they put on that you need that type of character. And some players in the wrong situation coming into New York could crumble or will be led astray or something like that. So they really, really emphasize, being able to handle the New York market for all positions, not just Caleb Williams.
Shane?
Yeah, I mean, I think he would have played a part, but I think if there had been an option there to draft him, I think the talent and potential would have overridden any concerns in terms of handling himself in the media. And the reason I say that is because there is certain things that can do to kind of essentially media train a player. Let's not forget we've got Tibbs, who's there was media concerns about him, but okay, he's confident and that, but let's not forget we never thought there'd be issues with other players, and they've come out and had dig in the media about Giants fans flipping burgers and that. So just because a player's never got history for it doesn't mean that they are potentially not going to have issues or problems when they can face some sort of adversity in the future.
Yeah, and then if you sort of have a look at some of the other chats that were there, they kind of went around the room. They read out the names of different people, and then they kind of had them pitch their player essentially that they've been watching. But I thought one thing that was really interesting was that Mike Derris and Hannah Burnett, two of the scouts, actually had like Vox bits where they were talking just one-on-one to the camera. And they both kind of emphasised that it's about evaluation, organisational fit. And Burnett had a really great quote where she said that the pre-combine meetings are there to figure out who they are as a person, as you cannot miss on that. And it's so true. We've got players in our past, like Kadarius Toney, where we missed on the person. And that's why it never worked out, because we're not saying he didn't have talent, because you've got to have talent to be, draft eligible, let alone go in the first round. But the person is who we missed on. And now the Kansas City Chiefs are seeing exactly what we've seen across his very short tenure. But just a final thing on this, just a kind of a shout out really to Mike Derris, Hannah Burnett, Blaze Bell, Scott Hamill, Patrick Hanscombe, Brendan Profit, and all the other of the, scouting team who were on there, because what they gave us was an insight that we hadn't really seen before, and it was really, really interesting. I don't know what, Shane, your thoughts are on sort of how the scouts came across and how nice it was to see that side of the sort of behind the scenes markup.
Yeah, it was nice to kind of see, kind of in a way, the scouts get a little bit of limelight, because we do all this draft process. You got these are scouts that, don't forget, that can kind of be on the road for potentially weeks on end, not see their family. This might be how they see their family. A lot of the time he's on FaceTime and video calls, etc. So it's kind of a nice way to show a little bit of appreciation to the scouts, because when we draft players, we don't turn around and be like, oh yeah, Scout A spotted this player back in. So they don't really get much credit. If a player hits, oh, Joe Shane's hitting at the park. But it's not always Joe Shane that discovers that player. So it was kind of nice for the scouts to get a little bit of limelight and a little bit of credit for hopefully players that we've drafted, not just this year, but in like previous year as well, that go on and have success, all being well with the New York Giants.
So Kev, just obviously we do a lot of, I say we, I hold my hands up, it's you two boys, but you boys do a lot of the kind of like looking at college prospects and reviewing them. A lot of the stuff that you look at obviously is plays, it's tape, isn't it? Because it's very difficult for us to get a feel for a player mentally other than what he's showing on the field. So was it quite interesting to see that they actually really don't take plays into account at that first stage? They're reviewing the tape, obviously, but their focus, especially with the combine, is that mental side of things.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see, like, because obviously they've done the tape evaluation already, so they've got like a mark for that. So they'll have like, okay, a grade for that. And now when they meet the person, that grade could massively change because, like Shane said before, talent will win out in most cases, if it comes with talent. But that personality and meeting them face to face, and they're right, you cannot get a feel for someone unless you're standing in front of them. Like sometimes, even with Zoom calls, when we were in lockdown and everything, like it wasn't really the same sort of interacting with people over Zoom and stuff like that. Whereas, if you get someone down right in front of you and look them in the eye and talk to them, you get a much, much better feel for the personality. If they're lying to you, if if they're just telling you what you want to hear, or if they're being genuine, and if they'll be a genuine fit for your organization and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. So next up was the combine, which that was a good half of the episode, if not more. Looking at that, we've already spoken before the show, and we kind of said that there was so much that happened that it felt a little slow compared to last week's episode, but I guess that's because of the nature of the beast. It was very much more technical rather than the sort of like more humorous, more kind of introductory side of last week. But there was quite a lot to unpack in the combine interviews. Daves was leading the interview, so there was a quick recap of his history, focusing on his coaching of Favre at the Jets, obviously with him at the Browns as well. And then at Alabama, where he won his championships with Hurts and Tua, which I thought was quite interesting. Just a very, very quick introduction to Brian Daboll. And then it kind of went, there were a few other bits we'll cover later, but we're going to focus on the interview bits here. And they got straight into those. They spoke with Jaden Daniels, Drake May, JJ McCarthy, Caleb Williams, Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze, and Marvin Harrison. Now, one thing that I thought was really interesting was Dave got all the QBs to draw their favourite play and explain it to them. And the way Dave said it is, teach it to us like we're freshman quarterbacks in your quarterback room. So, he's wanting him to really dumb it down and really explain it intently. And then Dave's would do things with each of them, I guess, to test the attributes that they wanted to test for that specific player. So Jaden Daniels was quite predominant in this sort of area. He asked Daniels to change it. He then got him to repeat the new play call to him, and then said, "Oh, what would you do if the defense was in cover one?" And I think the answer was touchdown, wasn't it? I think touchdown, which obviously is going to go down well when you're speaking to coaches. And Daniels actually, like I said, got a lot of airtime here. There was another clip where Dave was speaking to him about New York being a big market and how you would deal with a scenario where they'd lost the first three and he was being hammered. And Daniels kind of said, "Oh, don't worry, I've played in Death Valley." Now, you two probably know more about LSU. I'm not sure how LSU compares to the New York media, but as he was going through, Dave just kind of goes, "Time out. What was that play?" And it was just really interesting to see how he's trying to trip him up, but kind of didn't. I mean, obviously they spoke to, as we said, JJ, they spoke to Caleb, they spoke to May. Was there anything else that stood out for you, Ev?
Yeah, it was just really good to see sort of like how the players like recall the plays back to them. And we were talking about it before. It's a foreign language. It literally is like me trying to learn Spanish or something like that. It is a completely different language. But I suppose once you get all the terminology down, it's like second nature, so it wouldn't be too bad. But I think Daniels came across really, really well, and so did Drake May. Drake May is just, a phenomenal quarterback. We've talked endlessly about how good he is, but Daniels as well. Don't forget, Daniels is, I think he's a fifth-year player in college, so he's played at Arizona State, and he's obviously gone to LSU as well and played a couple of years there. So you kind of would expect him to be able to have that sort of like knowledge and recall down, because he's like so experienced. But Dable trying to trip them up, I think, is quite funny. I think, it's like, talking about, this, that, the other, right, Bash, go back to that play, please. Just like it's a really, really good insight. And it's quite interesting to see how this episode focused on QBs and wide receivers, considering, everyone thought that they were definitely the two of the top positions that we were looking for at number 6.
Shane, what were your thoughts? I know we were speaking beforehand about how it's the first time we saw the personalities, and I know you brought up that you weren't a fan of JJ on there.
Yeah, I didn't really like the way JJ kind of come across. There's a little bit of arrogance there, which I appreciate. Most NFL players have to have, but I just didn't like it. It's it's kind of like a job interview, really. I mean, I'm not going to beat around the bush. People probably kind of know that I can only just about talk English. I've been in Germany for 2 weeks, and I feel like I'm closer to talking German than I am talking quarterback. Like that was just not a clue what was going on, to be honest. Yeah. I like needed subtitles or something to help me out at times. But yeah, it was really interesting, and kind of hats off to him, because there's a reason why they say quarterback is the hardest and smartest position on the field, and that kind of just getting a little bit of a glimpse into it. I mean, you think that was just one play. Rookie quarterbacks going to training camp, having to learn a full folder. Like, nah, I'm all right, thank you. But one of the things we did mention kind of before we come on the air is obviously me and Kev kind of alluded to it pre-draft about kind of the would you rather have Rome, would you rather have Malik? And I'm not saying Malik's going to be a bad player. I am high on Malik. I think Malik's going to have an absolutely fantastic NFL career, all being well, touch wood, fingers crossed, etc. But I was watching the Roma Dunze interview thinking, how would you get these answers and not draft this kid? Like, he come across so well. Like, the way he talked pre-draft in the media, and even after the draft when he got drafted by the Bears, and then you kind of see what he was speaking about in the interview room with the Giants at the Combine, and I just think, how did you not draft this kid? Because I just think my comp for him was Larry Fitzgerald, a fantastic player both on and off the field, the way he conducts himself and that, and I just, a kind of part of me was thinking, what could have been with Rome?
I mean, we're getting to neighbours in a minute, but yeah, Rome came across really, really well in his interview, and very articulate, and yeah, just it kind of wowed me probably more than the other two did. One thing, Kev, just get your thoughts on Marvin Harrison Jr. They obviously showed a little bit about him, and they showed about his dad, and a young Marvin being in the crowd and stuff like that. But one thing that really stood out to me was Mike Groh tried to get him to talk trash about his own quarterback at Ohio State, and he refused. He just kind of, he didn't bite. What do you think about that? Because that takes a lot of humility and shows that he's obviously a massive team player, because he turned around and just said, "Oh, I would have caught it. It's fine." Because Mike basically said, "Oh, it's a shit throw, isn't it?" Like he was waiting for him to bite.
And it would be very easy for Marvin Harris to run and go, yeah, it was an awful throw. Like, as in, like, the result of the play wasn't on me, it was on someone else. But he didn't do that. And it shows like great sort of leadership, it shows maturity. And I think, he's everyone's number one QB wide receiver for a reason coming into this draft. I mean, obviously, it helps having someone like Marvin Harrison Sr. as your dad to be able to learn off, and like he's a proper class act anyway. So that didn't surprise me at all. And also, like, people were talking about him not doing stuff at the combine. There's two ways to look at it. I mean, like, I look at the way he said it, as in like he's preparing to be an NFL player. He wants to get in football shape. Like he probably could get fit enough to run a 4.3, right? Which would be fantastic. But he would get himself out of football shape to do that. He wants to stay in football shape and go out there. There's no real difference between 4.3 and 4.4. Let's be honest. When you go out there, make plays. Do you know what I mean? Can you make plays? And that's what it's about at the end of the day. So him not doing stuff at the combine doesn't bother me. But then seeing someone like Rome Odunze going out there and doing everything and staying on the field later than everyone else to try and get that shuttle time down like he did, sort of shows that determination to try and go out there and just do the best possible things you can do to put yourself in the right position. So it's so interesting to see the contrast, and whereas I don't think one's better than the other. I just think that I agree with both angles they're coming from, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about neighbours, because out of all of the players that they did do interviews with, we did draft one of them. So, we should probably talk about that one. Dave's kind of set the tone before the interview by saying to Joe, I had that LSU tape on. I watched that neighbours dude's a baller, and you immediately knew he'd fallen in love, didn't you? Like he immediately had those butterflies in his stomach, and he was ready to run up and make the pick there and then. And then I thought what he actually spoke to neighbours about was really, really interesting because of those character or potential character concerns that people thought were there. So in the interview, he started with a banger of a question, really, saying, how do you handle losing? And, neighbours kind of held his hands up. He was truthful and said, I hate it. I hate it more than I love winning, which I think is an absolute cracking little quote there. And then Dave's followed it with a question about not getting the ball early enough when you're on the field. Like, you want to get the ball early, get it in your hands. And he said, yeah, I handle it pretty tough. Dave did say he doesn't mind that. And I think the exact words were he fucking hates losing too. But you've got to harness it, haven't you? That's the difference. You've got to harness it. One bit that did make me chuckle and pretty much floored me, to be honest, was when Dave went, I lose it too as a coach. You've got to learn how to harness that. And Joe just had that little side eye, little squeeze of the shoulder, and then you could just see the smile on his face. I mean, is he alluding to maybe that he's a shame that he's had a little word with him and said, this year we're going to have a little tone down Daves, aren't we? Little tiny tone down Daves.
Yeah, I mean, I just looked at Joe Shane thinking, yeah, you do. And one thing we'll never see is I'd love to see if Wheat Martindale's watched that episode and what he maybe thinks about Dave's losing. It seems all the rumoured goings on that have had between them. But I think like you know on the head. I think Dave's quite quickly fell in love with neighbours tape-wise, and then I think his answer about like kind of his attitude and that, I think that just sealed the deal. And like Kev said before we went on air, I think it was probably more Dave's pushing neighbours, saying, neighbours fits my offense, neighbours fits what I do. And obviously it was interesting the comments as well, I thought, about that Brandon Brown was having with Joe Shane in terms of Malik Neighbours, and Joe Shane turned around and said, Daniel loves him as well. And I think there was a comment from Brandon Brown about something like whoever's going to be quarterback, which was interesting because then obviously we've seen Joe Shane kind of look and see where the Patriots box was and then tootle off over there for a quick little chat.
So, Kev, one thing that was mentioned afterwards was between Brandon Brown and Joe Shane, literally in that same conversation that Shane's just been talking about there. It was at the very beginning where he turned around and went, I thought that Neighbours was quite reserved, and that Joe was obviously expecting Neighbours to have a little bit of an edge to him, a little bit of arrogance, but we didn't really kind of see. Do you think that maybe that was a turning point where they thought, actually, we can mould this kid? Like, they were shocked to find out that he isn't quite as arrogant as maybe he'd been made out to be.
Yeah, definitely. That's why we're going back to that conversation about like seeing these guys in person, getting in front of them. Because obviously the tape's there, and we all saw the Neighbours tape. Like, I mean, it was phenomenal, some of the numbers he put up and how he got open and what a good player he was. Like, and Dave's just absolutely fell in love with him. So that's when you guys sit down and see the guy, and I can see why they like him in the sense that, Dave's that sort of hate losing mentality, and he loves ball. That's one thing that everyone keeps saying. He loves ball. He's about ball first. So it's so good to see that, like, again, that's where it comes out. You have the talent here, and then where does the character come in? Does the character push his grade up, or does the character push his grade down slightly? And I think knowing that, you got him at a certain level, and then when you talk to him, it's like, okay, all the talent's there. Now, is this a Kadarius Toney attitude problem, or is this like a high character guy, loves football, football's everything kind of guy? And people are kind of like in the middle of that spectrum, so to speak. So I think he was definitely showed that he's on the right side of the spectrum of, towards like football matters first and foremost. And it's definitely someone that Dable will get the ball to. And I think when he said about like, what would happen if you didn't see the ball so much on Sundays, and his answer was really, really, really telling, because he kind of said like, well, I've been in the game plan all week in practice. So if we're practicing all week to get me involved in the game, and we don't do that on Sunday, what are we doing during the week? If we're getting a game plan for this coming week, and I'm getting 20-30% of the targets, and I'm getting no targets on Sunday, then something's wrong there. So that I can kind of like that really stood out for me, that comment that, like, if we practice something during the week, implement it at the game day.
Yeah, it's almost like he's giving it's not an excuse for him. It's kind of emphasizing the point that, look, if you want me to be the alpha, make me the alpha. Shane, did you want to add something to that?
I was going to say, when you talk about arrogance with Millie, when we say arrogant, do we mean like throwing $100 bills in nightclubs? Is that? I just want to confirm, is that where we're going with that one?
I think that's called having a good time.
Right, I'm going to say something about this, right? I just because like maybe it's because I'm a 42-year-old Irish fella from a small village in the middle of nowhere in Ireland, right? And maybe like throwing $100 bills around in a club just sort of isn't my kind of thing. Now, I'm not trying to be sort of that grumpy old man, right? But I kind of would, I don't know. I don't like it. Is it a red flag? Not particularly. No, it's not a big red flag. It's not like a deal breaker for me, but it's just something I don't want to see my players do. And I kind of like this regime about, smart, tough, dependable. Be smart, as in like, you want the high character kind of guy. So him doing this, will that mean he has a character issue? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It means he's a young lad out having fun. I get that. But I would just prefer my players not to sort of put themselves in those type of positions. That's all. That's what I'll say in the matter now.
See, it surprises me because I can literally picture Kev making it rain. You know what I mean?
It's interesting that you've got that opinion, whereas Shane clearly is just like Malik. Just come over to Germany. Me and you will go party. We'll go party.
What's his Twitter handle again? I'll drop you a quick quad if you get over in time for Sunday.
Oh God, we'd be blacklisted
if we're not already.
If we're not already, well, according to Dion, he looks at Twitter, so there we go.
But just to finish that quickly, so and Shane touched on it there. This did show GM obviously preferred Rome, and the head coach preferred Neighbours, and I'm kind of glad that the GM went with the coach's pick on this, because at the end of the day, he's the one scheming him open and scheming him at the weekend when it comes to going out there and trying to win games on Sundays.
Yeah, totally agree. Right, let's just fire through some random musings, and then we'll move on to the state of play stuff. So, small part right at the beginning, salary cap reveal. Joe turned around about having renewed hope about getting something done with X. But it was interesting that Rossetti, who last week was obviously banging the door for keeping Saquon, turned around and went, well, Barkley's going to want Jonathan Taylor money now, isn't he? So kind of almost like the turning point of okay, the salary cap's increased. That's going to play against us as well. Both of them seem quite happy with the increase. Though I think, Joe Shane was trying to say to Rossetti, let's not get ahead of ourselves too quickly. I'll get your thoughts on this bit, because I thought this was really interesting that during the combine part, there was a bit about Joe Shane's presser. And I thought the editing on this part was absolutely phenomenal. The way that they kind of went from here's Joe practicing the answer to the question to his actual answer, which was very similar. And I just really, really liked that bit. But he was shown sitting down with Dion, who is the Senior Director of Football Communications. And they went through a little sort of back and forth on questions around Barkley and McKinney and Jones. But I just want to get your boys' opinion on the little slip of the mask from Joe Shane when Dion said, Barkley's contract, there might be a rebuttal to that because it might allude to, they might turn around and say, well, what about the franchise tag? Because Joe's telling white lies saying, well, it's still on the table, known full well that he was never going to use it. But the joke response was kind of like, well, I'll just turn around and tell him that I offered him a big contract last month or last season, and he didn't want it. And Dion's face just dropped, and then all of a sudden he was like, "I'm joking." But Shane, what are your thoughts on Joe Shane's kind of animosity almost there? Like you could tell that was his real thoughts almost.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the transition was kind of seamless in them questions, the way it was produced, and it was absolutely phenomenal. In terms of the Saquon thing, I do think if Saquon had come back to the Giants, we might not have seen that jokey clip aired. Kind of part of me is thinking along the lines of, and I know this might sound a little bit childish, but maybe the Giants are like, you know what, kind of Saquon, you screwed us over. You've gone to our rivals. You turned down good money from us last year. we're not going to show you in a good light. Maybe that's wrong wording from me, but hopefully you kind of get where I'm coming from by what I'm saying with that. Whereas, like I said before we went on the air, there's not much been involved in regards to X. His name's been mentioned a couple of times, but there's been no real talk, no conversations, no phone calls, etc. like there has been with Saquon. So, kind of my only thinking at the moment, with everything I've seen through 2 episodes, is maybe the Giants with X, it was a case of, you let us know the price, we can't match it, unfortunately. We loved you as a player, and there was a kind of a handshake, good luck for the rest of your career. Whereas with Saquon, which we'll probably come on to shortly in a little bit more detail, there wasn't such a nice part in other ways, I kind of get the impression of.
Kev, what were your thoughts on this kind of Joe Schoen deal on kind of back and forth on that?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think Joe Schoen, I think you put it perfectly, let that mask slip a bit there, like to show like his true feelings. Because look, at the end of the day, look, Joe Schoen offered him pretty much the same contract that he accepted from the Eagles last season. Now, I can guarantee you that was more than he wanted to offer. Because he doesn't really believe in paying running backs. So he went that extra mile out of his comfort zone, and he got knocked back by Saquon. Didn't he say in the first episode, like, the negotiations felt like it took 10 years off his life? Like the relationship between him, Saquon, and the agency just seems like that's fractured and broken. So yeah, he did let that slip there. Like, and I do think that at this moment in time, Saquon was coming back sort of at a price point that he was happy with, and the market dictated. So I think so he kind of feels burnt by Saquon and his agent, and I think you can kind of see how pissed off he was, like, with the whole situation, and part of him's like, you know what, if you're coming back, come back on my terms.
Yeah, I mean, Steve makes a good point there. With all due respect to X, he doesn't sell TV ratings in comparison to Saquon, and he's right. The whole animosity thing with the Eagles and the controversy around him going to the Eagles and seeing how that all unfolds puts bums in seats, doesn't it? At the end of the day, it really does. So, right. DB coach Jerome Henderson chatting to Drew Phillips before drills and mentioning to another team's coach how good he was at the Senior Bowl, and Shane Bowen and Dabes up in the stands chatting about how good Nubin looked, were kind of nice little nods to the future. Interesting as well, like, at that point we had no idea we were going to draft those two. So it's kind of nice to see organic conversations happening between coaches and between coordinators and head coaches about players that we have taken, that kind of shows that there is thought and meaning behind what happens in the draft and how it evolves. We've already mentioned about Joe Schoen going over to the Patriots box just to as he said, plant the seed, which I think is something that Shane mentioned last week with the conversations around Brian Burns, and the conversations with the Panthers GM was a plant the seeds kind of thing. There was a little extra bit about Burns' deal progressing. I think that's kind of a little teaser for next week, isn't it? But it was interesting. I thought that they were talking about circling back to X and saying, "Oh, we're going to offer him something, but bear in mind this is more than what we want to offer, and it's only probably going to be on the table for a week." And I think it was Brandon Brown who turned around and said, "Does that mean that the Wilkins deal is probably off the table?" Which is interesting, because it means that, despite the thought process last week where we thought Wilkins had kind of been disregarded really as an option, actually he was a genuine option, and it looks like we could have gone down that path there. Do you think it would have been a case of Wilkins rather than Burns? Because I doubt we would have gone for both, would we? It would have been way too much money. Shane, what do you think about those few bits about the kind of the nods to Nubin and Phillips, to the Patriots bit, and then also the Wilkins mention there?
Yeah, I mean, like, in terms of the Patriots, I say that's just kind of how I've always thought conversations kind of get going. Just I don't know what, I don't know if anyone else has pictured it differently, but I always just thought it was kind of like, oh yeah, if you're ever looking at moving, just let us know, and all of a sudden just the ball gets rolling there. I'd like to have maybe seen some interviews with Nubin and Phillips if they did them. I don't know if they did them at the combine, because obviously you're only allowed to interview so many I believe. So, I would have liked to have seen them. And naturally, I'd also like to see them talking about players that maybe we didn't draft, just to kind of get a bit of an idea as to who was actually on the board. But understandably, they're never going to give that information away. And yet, in regards to Wilkins, I do think it was a case of they liked him, but you're already paying one D tackle decent money. And I do think part of it probably come down to Shane Bowen's preference. Do you want this stud D tackle next to Dex, or do you want this stud pass rusher? And we've not seen it yet, or maybe we will never see it, but I do kind of anticipate it with Shane Bowen saying the scheme I plan on running, it's going to be more beneficial for us to have a edge rusher than it is a D tackle. And that's not taking anything away from Christian Wilkins, because he's a fantastic player. And, you think Dex mic'd up his fun. Imagine Dex mic'd up next to his best mate. Well, that'd be TV, that would.
Kev, what were your thoughts on the whole contract, the more contracty talks around this, but obviously talking about Burns and how that progressed, but also, the little tidbits about, it almost seemed like there was a lot more want for extra return than there probably was Barkley.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can kind of see how teams have to pivot. You kind of have a plan in place to do one thing, and then a spanner gets thrown in the works, and you have to pivot and move on to something else. I mean, so the way I kind of look at things is what would you rather? Would you have a 27-year-old running back with multiple injuries who's a star coming back at a very, very high price point? Xavier McKinney, whose market exploded, but we didn't really expect it. We kind of thought it'd be around the 12-13 mark, and he would get 17-18 per. So those people have had to go. So in the grand scheme of things, would you rather them back and a second round pick, or someone like Singletary come in with Nubin coming in, and then also getting someone like an elite pass rusher like Brian Burns? Because if you paid Barkley and paid X, and the money wasn't there for Wilkins or for Burns. And I think obviously Shane hit the nail on the head there in Shane Bowen's defense. That pass rusher is absolutely huge opposite Kayvon Thibodeaux. And also, did you see the way Shane Bowen kind of eyes lit up when they were talking about Nubin? They were sitting down just talking about, that Minnesota safety, and Shane Bowen looked over at him yeah, he's as in yeah, I like him, so and I think he was the end of first round talent, and to be able to get him sort of at the back of the second round was phenomenal. And then the Drew Phillips as well. It just shows you how high they were on him. So we look at that at being a bit of a reach, but people have to remember as well, a lot of the players that we kind of look at and put into lists and top fives and top tens, some of these players, the Giants take off the board completely. They're not even on there. They might have a board of only 250 draft picks. They might only have a board of 150 because people are just taking off for medical reasons, for character issues, for lots of things So when people think that Drew Phillips was taken higher than he should have, he might have dropped to them on their board, if you know what I mean. And you can kind of see through this interaction how high they were on him, and he did have a phenomenal Senior Bowl. So I completely see where that was coming from. But like you said, it's kind of nice seeing. Okay, we took these players, and it was there. They kind of these were players that didn't sort of they didn't take as a what do you call it, as a second backup, as in consolation prize. These were players that they were obviously interested in, and they brought them in, and now they're Giants.
So we've got a couple more points to go to before we wrap this one up. Obviously, this has been longer than last week's, but I feel like there was a lot more kind of chunkier information this week that we could really get into. Chris just said the most interesting thing about the series so far is that conversation between Shane and Saquon at the end there. It's really difficult to kind of quantify everything about that conversation because on one sense, Joe Shane's basically saying you can test the market and there is no offer there. Now, we've still got weeks to come. We're probably going to find out next week more and hopefully just put this to bed because I feel like we're still talking about Saquon, but Hard Knocks have brought it up, so there we go. But in the same sort of sentence as Joe kind of going against that, we made him an offer thing. And like I said, that could still happen. Was it me or did Saquon just not sound interested? He was mentally checked out. I mean, Shane he was your boy. Is there any part of that conversation and any part of that tone from Saquon that sounded like he wanted to be a Giant?
None whatsoever. He had no interest in picking up the phone. He checked out by then. I think he knew full well. I think when he seen the call ringing, when he seen the phone ringing and seen it was Joe Shane, I think he kind of anticipated where it was going to go. And like I say, he had no interest in kind of even talking to Joe Shane. He wasn't interested. Even when Joe Shane said, "You're going to give us a chance to match an offer, or you're not going to give us an opportunity." What do you mean? Well, it's pretty obvious. It's not fucking difficult, Saquon. You know how to be part of an NFL offense, as we've worked out. It's quite complicated. It's not difficult asking what Joe Shane means. Are you going to give him a chance to match? Yes or no? And like I kind of alluded to earlier, maybe that gets aired because Saquon, I don't want to get saying did the Giants dirty, but he didn't give the Giants an opportunity to match the deal. Plus, he's gone to a divisional rival, so the NFL films have gone, can we air this? And the Giants have gone, F Saquon, yeah, carry on. Maybe that's what's happened.
Kev, what were your thoughts there? I mean, Shane probably hits it bang on the head there, doesn't he? That like if Saquon re-signs with the Giants, I mean, his demeanour probably would have been different if he was more up for that. But if he re-signs with the Giants, then probably probably doesn't get aired. So a very different episode.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I also think that at this point now, Saquon's made his mind up, and he feels disrespected by the New York Giants in the front office. So if he gets an offer from anyone that matches what he believes his valuation is, he was gone. And I don't think he would give the Giants a chance to match. I think the bridges were broken. It was a conversation that was very awkward. You could tell what we talked about as well, like Shane's pissed off from everything else that we've seen. But in this conversation, you could tell he was trying to be the good guy, for want of a better term. And Barkley was just like, why are you ringing me? Like what's going on? Yeah, I'm back in Jersey working out, what I want type of thing. You can just see it was so dismissive. So I think, the seed was planted before this conversation, and you can tell like it was kind of like bridges were burnt already.
Let's end it on a lighter note. seeing as much information as they have on Hard Knocks, there's some really, really good character stuff in there and some really funny bits in there. One thing I don't have written down, but it's just come to my head, was when they were talking about Brian Burns and Joe Shane said, "Don't worry, I'll play corner." I thought that was good. I mean, there we go. He said it.
They said corner, like they've mentioned it in both episodes. They've mentioned like needing a corner a few times. Yeah,
they have. We mentioned it on last week's episode that corner was the number one thing that Joe Shane said he thought we needed. So, but let's talk about the 40 conversation that went on for ages, but was genius. So, Daves turns around to Carmen and says, "Do you think you can run it in 7 seconds?" Carmen is a realist, obviously, and goes, "No." Daves then goes, "I think I could walk it in 7." And I'm not sure what kind of mental world he lives in, but there ain't no way that anyone's walking it in 7. I don't think Xavier Worthy could walk it in 7. Everyone piles on Daves because obviously then he turns around and he says, "I could run it in 7 if you've got a plate of wings at the end there for me." What was it he turned around? Oh, that was it. Joe Shane. So Dave's then turned around after the Worthy thing and says, "Would you reckon if I started the 20, could I beat him?" Joe Shane's absolute put down of saying you couldn't even beat him from the 35 was brutal. But then I think Tim McDonald destroyed him the worst by turning around and saying that he saw Dave's run across the street the other night, which Joe Shane put his head in his hands and almost couldn't control himself. I mean, how nice is it, though, just to see that sort of back and forth between the coaches, Shane, and then kind of the question, I guess, on here has actually come from one of the comments where Kieran has said, "How quick would Daves really do the 40?"
Yeah, I mean, like as we already established, some people on the Giants do check Twitter, and Daves has got a bit of a temper, as he's admitted himself. I don't know if I want to answer this question because, he don't get pissing the man off himself, do you? But yeah, it was good just to see some light-hearted banter between them, and kind of, in a way, being there to do work with your business hat on when you need to in meetings, etc. But then when you're outside of meetings, having a bit of a joke, breaking it up, helping relax people, etc. I don't know. I reckon Dave's runs a 40 in. What did he say he could do it in? A sub 7?
7.
8.5.
And what do you think?
He can do a sub 10.
Wow.
Is that a better answer? He can do a sub 10. I'm not saying he can't do a sub 7. I'm saying he can do a sub 10.
What would your aim be if you had to do a 40? What would be the number that if you went over it on a 40, you'd be pissed off?
I did a 40 about 5 years ago when I was at about 15 and a half stone, and I did a 5.3. So now I'm about 3 stone lighter. I'd be aiming for in and around that 5 mark.
I've always said under 5. Like, if I was to run a 40, I'd like to get 4 point something.
I'll tell you what, though, when I did that 40, I was like, are you sure that's 40 yards? Because that feels like 100 yards. Like that's a lot longer than I anticipate 40 yards being.
Steve isn't having that. Dave is doing it sub 10.
I mean, of course, he's interested about the where do you need to stand to beat Xavier Worthy?
It's like you almost need the simulcam, don't you, that they have with Rich Eisen running against everyone.
I don't know who it was, but someone went 35 yards.
Yeah.
35 yards.
Yeah. Kev?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was just really, again, a peek behind the curtain, isn't it? That's sort of like, they're in between drills and stuff, and they're chatting away, and not much is going on the field, so they're able to do that light-hearted banter, have a bit of crack and stuff and it's really good to see. I mean, but I tell you what though, like that was February, and Daves was hefty then. Have you seen Daves recently? He shifted a bit of timber in a short period of time, so I don't know. I reckon he could creep under that 7 now if he was to run it this week.
I mean,
that's maybe the motivation.
Well, Rich Eisen done it 6.2.
Yeah. We're going to have to do our 40s at some point. I mean, the shoulder surgery's happened now, and we're on the road to recovery. So once I've got full motion back, look out. Anyway, that's kind of it for the Hard Knock stuff. Phenomenal episode. Episode 3, obviously, next week. We know how difficult it is to watch it. If you've listened to this and you haven't watched the episode, obviously it's been quite spoiler heavy, but we have to talk about it. There's no other way for us to really address it. Reach out to us. There are links that are working for us to be able to watch it. Hopefully the NFL media pull their finger out and it comes out over here. Personally, I don't think it's the NFL media's fault. I think it's HBO who are kind of, gatekeeping this at the moment. You never know, something might happen. We might get them in a few weeks' time. But for now, if you do need anything, let us know. But let's move on and talk defensive tackles. State of Play is back. Suspiciously, after missing all the offensive line chat, Shane is now back for the defensive side chat, which is shocking. I don't know if you heard Dan, but Dan's going to give you your own episode called Shane's Offensive Line Musings. Probably the most X-rated episode we'll ever have, and it will be 20 minutes of nothing.
Very offensive.
Saying everyone's shite. But for now...
Excuse me, if we're ever going to get close to getting cancelled, that'll do it. I cannot be held responsible for the words that come out of my mouth.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll let you start off the defensive ones with the reigning, defending Big Blue UK Island Giant of the Year. Take it away.
Yes, I will say I am disappointed I missed out on the offensive line. Anyway, now that's out of the way. Now we're going to talk about, the big man himself, probably most Giants fans' favourite player on the roster currently, I'd probably say, if not probably 90%. And that is Sexy Dexter Lawrence. the best pure nose tackle in the league. Let's face facts, it's not even close. He tore it up again last season, despite being the second most double-team defensive tackle, finishing in the top 10 at his position in pressures, hurries, and quarterback hits. Now, across the season, Dex only had 2 games without a pressure, and both those games were games that saw the Giants struggle against the Las Vegas Raiders and the New Orleans Saints. Now, outside of those games, he had a season high 3 sacks in week 7 against the Commanders, and a season high 15 total pressures the following week against our little baby brothers, the New York Jets. If you look at the closest player to him in terms of pressure from a pure nose tackle perspective, it would be the Chicago Bears' Andrew Billings, and he only had 23 pressures, which equated to just 35% of Dex's numbers. Now, in terms of Dex's numbers for the season, he had 65 pressures, which ranked him 7th, and he also had 45 hurries, which also ranked him 7th. 14 quarterback hits would be good enough to be tied 5th in the league with 6 sacks. I was about to say 21 sacks then. 6 sacks, tied him for 21st in the league. Finally, 35 stops, which tied him for 13th, along with 37 solo tackles, which tied him for 16th. Now, as we've kind of already highlighted with previous Hard Knocks episodes, Shane Bowen has already said that his mantra is attack from the front, and, you know, what bigger key to our part of that is in Dexter Lawrence. Now, is that going to involve a change in technique? Possibly. However, I hope not. I hope he keeps him where he's at. Excuse me. But, you know, if Bowen is smart, he's going to let Dex continue to play the most of his snaps at that nose tackle position where, you know, he's kind of really developed since he got moved into that position over the last couple of years. You know, he may also continue to attract double teams. But that can only be a good thing for the pass rushers, as we've mentioned, you know, Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeaux in the past, even Azeez, as well as a rotational piece. It can only be beneficial for them. Now, obviously, Dex was transformed under Wink Martindale, and as a result, he was selected to the Pro Bowl and was an All-Pro for the last 2 years. Craig, is there a bit of a worry that the change of the DC could potentially impact Dex's numbers and success?
I think if we were talking about a DC who had come in and said, I'm going to rip up everything and, you know, burn it to the ground and start again, there would be a much bigger risk. Because Bowen's come in and has said that he doesn't expect the players to have to change a lot because he plays a similar system, just in a very different way. I think we're probably going to be okay here. And I do also believe that if you have your best player being not just dominant at his position, but the best by a long margin at nose tackle, why would you affect that? There's no reason to. Dex is loved by fans unanimously, and Wink Martindale was a massive part of that. You cannot take that away from Wink. He transformed Dex from a defensive end, right end, left end kind of tackle to being a pure nose tackle that arguably is now the best defensive lineman in football now that Aaron Donald has retired. You know, you have to play to your strengths, and Dex's strength is nose tackle.
Kev, your thoughts on it?
Yeah, 100% agree with all that. I mean, like, there's a pathway, there's a blueprint. Sorry, there's a blueprint for why Dex is good and how to make him good, and I think you just kind of stick to that. Don't forget he had Jeffrey Simmons over at Tennessee, who Dex is a much superior player than, and he got great production out of him. So yeah, I don't worry about that at all.
So Dex is kind of like the lock, but outside of that, it gets a little bit more ropey. Now, let's start off with one of the sort of more veteran a veteran returner, shall we say, in Rakeem Nunez-Roches, or Nacho for those, and I will be referring him to as Nacho from now on because that is a mouthful. So after starting the season a second fiddle to Leonard Williams, Nacho saw a considerable increase in his playing time after Big Cat was traded across to the Seahawks. It wasn't exactly plain sailing for Nacho, though, as he posted an 18.2 missed tackle rate on just 26 completed tackles and only got a half sack, which came in a Week 17 loss against the Rams. Did have a good season on special teams. He played 113 snaps there. Didn't block a field goal or a punt, but he does have kind of like previous in that area, and I think that's something that you would value as a special teams coordinator. And obviously, we've got a new one now. If you do look at his numbers, 7 pressures all year, 6 hurries, 1 sack, 12 stops, 19 solo tackles. His highest is solo tackles, tied 74th. Everything else is way below that. Some even coming into the hundreds. It's not ideal. He didn't maybe play as consistently as he wanted to until later on, but you'd still expect better numbers. He's clearly not a pass rusher there. Now, for me, the expectation is that with our next player, Jordon Phillips, which Kev will be going through in a second, he was signed as another veteran presence alongside Nacho, and the 2 vets will probably rotate that spot next to Dex, unless one of the younger players can break out. And that's just facts at the moment. We still have a lot of raw talent there, which we'll get to, but we do have another vet there. So Kev, let us know a little bit more about Jordon Phillips.
Yeah, Jordon Phillips. Well, last season in his second stint with the Bills, 10-year vet had 392 snaps while starting 9 of the 14 games he played. Despite previously being a solid pass rushing option, he was overlooked due to talent of Leonard Floyd, Ed Oliver. Where did Ed Sullivan? Ed Oliver, Greg Russo. When Phillips was on the field, however, he wasn't his best showing, with only 12 tackles across the season, 7 missed, giving him a career high missed tackle rate of 38.8%. Now, his stats for last year: he had 19 pressures, 14 hurries, 2 quarterback hits, 3 sacks, 9 stops, and 9 solo tackles. Now, the expectation now, as mentioned in previous spot, talking about Nacho, the 2 experienced vets will likely be below Dex on the depth chart unless a rookie shines. But Phillips could have the edge over Nacho if that does happen, as he has experience in the 0, 1, 3, and 5 technique spots. So, I haven't looked at those 2 players, but the rest of the defense being so young, would it be any surprise that the most experienced group could be the front line, Shane?
So just trying to set myself off mute there. Joys of a hotel Wi-Fi. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of pressure on that front line. So the key is going to be what you do with Dex. Hopefully, we kind of keep Dex where he is, and it's kind of, are you going to kind of pair up with him? I mean, there's other players that we're going to talk about shortly as well that I'll hope to see maybe get involved more, maybe in rotational, and then that can kind of try and solidify kind of that spot and make it their old spot next to Dexter. But we've got experience, especially with Jordon Phillips coming in. Hopefully he can help take some of the pressure off. I mean, I do think kind of the defensive line is maybe a little bit weaker than last year. You think we started the season with Big Cat and also Aishawn, who was injured, but he was still part of the roster and would have been in those positional group chats, etc. So I mean, maybe maybe for me, defensive line is potentially the one position that's underlooked that could actually be a little bit of a problem, because you don't want Dex getting burnout.
So, Greg, do you think, as Shane said, with Dexter Lawrence getting burnt, but do you think these 2 players specifically, being veterans, being a little bit older, but do you think the D line, that specific position next to Dexter Lawrence, is the kind of the position you can get away with having more of a savvy vet there than a young sort of up and coming player?
Yeah, I think if Dex plays as that pure nose tackle, the player next to him is probably going to be just on the outside of one of the offensive guards. And you're right. You kind of... Jordon Phillips, especially because he is a man mountain. I'm not sure if you've seen, but he's like the biggest man on our roster. I think I've looked up. I think he weighs more than Dex by 1 pound. I think it's like 300 and something pounds. He's 6'6" as well. So he's a big boy. You could easily, especially in the run game, just pop him in there and just hope that his size allows him to dominate, and then maybe look at Nacho for more passing down opportunities. So I think that it is a good rotation there, but Shane is absolutely right. it's not as good as it was last year. But as you say, when you have a game wrecker like Dex, you probably can get away with it just a little bit more than maybe some other teams that have a more mediocre defensive front. Shane, you mentioned about youngsters. We might as well talk about one of them now, Jordan Riley.
Yeah, we will get there. Jordan Riley was another player who didn't see much of the field until Leo's departure. He played 136 snaps, with the majority of them coming in the final 6 games. And, you could clearly see that the rookie was a raw work in progress prospect. As he did struggle to display any kind of pass rush finishing with no pressure stats. However, in the run game, he was better, showing an ability to effectively anchor himself and make a tackle. In terms of his expectations, this is kind of where the battle could really begin, as there will likely be one spot behind the 3 vets, and Riley's going to be battling it out against the next 2 players that we'll be talking about. He did impress in last pre-season, and despite Andre Patterson being a fan, he's going to need to impress him again this coming camp.
Yeah, and as you say, there are 2 other players that he's probably going to be fighting up against. The first of those is DJ Davidson. Now, last season, he returned from an ACL tear that kind of cut short his rookie season, and he appeared in 15 games, but weirdly kind of had less snaps than the aforementioned Riley, who actually only appeared in 8 games. He started as the backup nose tackle to Dex, but lost it to Riley when Riley became healthy again. And because he lost that, Davidson was then shunted out to defensive end, where he was serviceable. He ended the season with 13 tackles, 1 for a loss, 2 pass deflections, half a sack, and a quarterback hit, which are better numbers than we've seen some of the other players above him record. Now, the general expectation around the Giants is that Davidson's best chance of making the roster is going to be at that backup nose tackle spot. However, he lost it to Jordan Riley, so he's going to kind of have a bit of an uphill battle going forward. He is a better pass rusher than Riley, who was non-existent in that kind of area, but he was inconsistent in both the run and passing game when he was brought into games. Kev, do you want to round us out with Ryder Anderson?
Yeah, so Ryder Anderson, last season, after appearing in 9 games, in 22, Anderson spent last season in the Giants practice squad and was not called up. Anderson's apparently added a bit of bulk over the offseason, hoping that helps him get back onto the roster. Anderson's body of work never seemed like a perfect fit for Winklett's system, so could be more of a fit under Bowen, who actually name-dropped the player in the first episode of the Hard Knocks. But those are 3 young players who are likely vying for only 1 spot, maybe 2 depending on the depth of the edge. So who is likely to be the odd man out here, Craig?
I'm not really sure. It's really difficult, because you could maybe say that Anderson has the edge over Davidson, with Davidson losing his job to Riley, and with Anderson being name-checked by Bowen quite early on Bowen's tenure. It would have only been his first week in the job, and he's already earmarked Anderson as being someone that he could really do stuff with. So it could be Davidson that is the odd man out here. And, has he done enough at the Giants to be poached off the practice squad if that's where he ends up going? Probably not. So out of the 3, he's probably the least risky option to kind of drop down to the practice squad, if that makes sense.
And who would you say, Shane?
Yeah, I think Craig's hit the nail on the head there. I mean, for me personally, Ryder Anderson would be the odd man out. I like DJ. I like DJ Davidson. Felt sorry for him kind of when he suffered that torn ACL back at Tottenham, which feels like it was an absolute lifetime ago now. Not that we ever bang on about it much. And I did like what Jordan Riley did at times as well when he was on the field last year. So my personal preference, would be Ryder Anderson. But as Craig says, with Ryder Anderson getting name dropped, you think if he'd have name dropped any of the other players like DJ Davidson, they would have been mentioned. The fact that I wasn't maybe gives Ryder Anderson the edge, and it's going to be kind of DJ against Jordon as to who's going to get that second spot.
So outside of those players, essentially, that we got 3 more who are probably going to be looking more at the practice squad side of things. Shane, up first is Timmy Horne.
Yeah, Tommy Horne, Timmy Horne, Tommy Horne. I don't know that. I don't know which one it is. That ain't good, is it?
I think it's Timmy.
Joys of being live. Yeah, Horne, as we'll call him. I try to avoid calling him Horne because it might not be a nickname he wants. But Horne, he is another player who played heavily in 2022, but did see a significant decrease. He started 2023 on the Falcons roster. He was only active for 3 games, and in those games only played between 24 and 35% of the snaps. The Giants then did sign him off Atlanta's practice squad due to an injury that Dex suffered, and he was put straight into action in week 16 against the Eagles. He only played 7 snaps, however, and that was his final active game of the season. Now, he's known as a throwback player, a kind of nose tackle that plugs gaps and stops the run, but his situational use could only see him get limited chances to impress during pre-season. And, you know, if that happens, then he could very well struggle to make a big enough impact to earn a roster spot or even a practice squad.
Yep, absolutely. Up next on there is Casey Rogers, who is one of 2 undrafted rookie free agents that we have on the roster. Last season was his second year at Oregon, but was mainly spent as a backup. However, he was still kind of able to make an impact. He got the 4th most snaps amongst the interior defenders. However, he had the 4th most pressures on the team across all defenders, with 17. He recorded 5 of those and his only sack of the season against Cal in just 17 pass rushing snaps, which is pretty impressive. Expectation, as we said before, we're in practice squad territory here. And, you know, the only thing to really look at with Casey Rogers is the fact that he had a $220K guarantee on his undrafted rookie free agent contract, which kind of shows that other teams were interested and he could be poached if he does end up going to the practice squad. Now, Oregon run a stunt-heavy scheme to generate pressure, and that's how Shane Bowen utilized his defense in Tennessee to great effect. So you could find that Casey could sneak on because of his experience in there, just as a situational player. That's probably his only way onto the roster. And then Kev, round us out on defensive tackle, Elijah Chatman. I must call him Chatman. It's a bit harsh, isn't it?
Elijah Chatman. In the last of the 5 seasons at SMU, Chatman was a multi-position player, which saw him rack up 33 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 5.5 sacks on defense. He did, however, also have 27 snaps at fullback, recording at 85.4 grade as a run blocker and a 74.7 pass rush grade with no pressures allowed. Chatman might be on here as defensive lineman. However, due to his size, he's most likely route to the roster could be as a fullback. Now, Patricia Traina mentioned that Nikita Whitlock, who was a fullback for the Giants between 2014 and 2016, had a similar path and was also a defensive tackle by trade.
Yeah, I think this has kind of been highlighted online as being probably a more probable route to the roster, but his only kind of downfall on this will be if the Giants take 3 quarterbacks. If they have 3 quarterbacks on the roster, there's not a chance. But if he can sneak on as a fullback, I think that's a really, really good sort of potential route for an undrafted rookie free agent. And let's be honest, we haven't had fullbacks very often across the few years that we've been sort of doing the podcast. So now normally we'd go through the projection sheet here and look at the historical lineups and the players and everything like that, but I'm just wary of the time and we've still got edge rushers to do, so I'm going to skip that for now. But I do have a question for Kevin Shane here based on the sort of roster projection. So I seen on Hard Knocks last week, Bowen mentioned that he wanted a 1-gap penetrating lineman and Ryder Anderson was touted as a potential option. Could this be another position that potentially could benefit from a veteran roster cut down, or do you think that other fringe players can potentially be coached up by Bowen to become that 1-gap lineman that he wants, Kev?
Yeah, I mean, I would love it to see come from a younger player from the roster. I mean, it's kind of like when a new defensive coordinator comes in, it's a clean slate for everyone. Like vets, people who have practice squad last year, rookies, undrafted free agents. But again, we've seen with the way the Joe Shea and can really work the waivers and cut down of players. So I don't know if it'd be a high priority, but I could definitely see a move being made in that position.
Shane, what are your thoughts on that sort of the depth side of defensive tackle?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I'd like it to come kind of from a younger player within, for the simple reason that's what we hire coaches for, to coach players up, to make them, the right player for the position. And I do think, kind of in terms of like vet players, we've already alluded to other parts of the defense. He's not exactly got tons of experience. So, I'd rather use the experience there than in the defensive line. So, I'd like to see the positional coaches. And I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but earn their money and, coach players up and be like, okay, you know what? Go to Joe Shane or Dave's or, Shane Bowl and say, look, we don't need to worry about this. We've got this kid. We've coached him up to where we want him to be or where we need him to be at least, and he can continue to develop.
Yeah, absolutely. And this might be something that's addressed when we actually get towards the Hard Knocks episodes on the draft, when they might give us a reasoning behind defensive tackle not being something that they looked at. Right, let's flip over to the edges then. And I'm pretty sure it's Kev up first, looking at Mr. Thibodeaux.
Yeah, so the Giants' headline pass rusher played in every game in 2023, recording his fourth most snaps in defense with 981. He also improved immensely compared to 22 rookie season, finishing sacks higher at rate of finishing the highest number of sacks in a season since 2014. Despite Thibodeaux's proficiency, still came for criticism, which led to now infamous radio show that Carl Banks was hung up on. Don't forget that through the game that he followed the radio show, Tibbs had his best game of the season, decimating the Jets front, finishing with 3 sacks, 7 tackles, and a forced fumble. Now, his stats from last year, he had 43 pressures, 26 hurries, 4 quarterback hits, 13 sacks, 29 stops, and 25 solo tackles. Wink Martindale once said that Kayvon was a can opener and would free up other players. Shane Bone won't see Tibbs this way, and hopefully will take the shackles off and allow the man to hunt. The addition of the next player we're going to cover could also help, and he will finally have a legitimate partner on the opposite side of the ball. Now, many fans, analysts, and sites lauded Thibodeaux for breakout 2023 season. But is this wrong to expect more of him than he actually 24 could be, where he really has a breakout? Sorry. That goes to Shane, sorry.
Making sure we're on mute for a start.
Yeah.
Looking. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a player that we're going to talk about in a moment that will kind of, hopefully help Thibodeaux really break out this season. He, like I said, he had a breakout last year, but Azeez spent a lot of time on the sideline due to injuries, which meant that you've got Dex, but then you've also got Thibodeaux that can focus and not really got to worry about the opposite side. So hopefully with the player that we've acquired, everyone knows about that we'll be talking momentarily about. You really do hope he can kind of go on and like he said himself, he's always looking for that record.
Yeah, definitely. So Craig, 2023, 13 sacks, phenomenal. But do you think in 2024 we'll see a more rounded, better player in Thibodeaux?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you might see a more, I don't want to say aggressive because that's kind of the wrong word, but I think you might find that he does attack more. You might not see the stats kind of reflect it because of the fact that he's got Burns on the opposite side and the fact that we've got Dex in the middle as well. And there's only so many people that can be double teamed. So could it unlock Thibodeaux? Absolutely. But in the same sentence, could it unlock Burns on the opposite side because Thibodeaux's there getting attention? The exact same thing. It would be really, really nice if maybe both of them shone in a way. Yeah. And it would be really nice. I would actually prefer to not see Thibodeaux get more than 11.5 sacks if it meant that Thibodeaux and Burns both got over 10.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great shout. I mean, also, it's one of those things where like stats are very, very good, but you always see them pass the eye test. You want to see him beat the tackle. Do you know what I mean? You want to see him get around the corner, hassle the quarterback. But so Sheehan, on to his partner in crime for this season, Brian Burns.
Yeah, known as Spider-Man. I don't know if anyone knows how he got that. Yeah, how he got that nickname, but I'm quite honoured that I'll get to talk about this guy, considering Craig's a Florida State alumni as well. But yeah, Brian Burns. Obviously, it's kind of hard to review his season for the past year gone. Basically, due to his stats, the fact that there's not being around the bush. Panthers are a shit team. You know, they ended up 2-15 record. They got number 1 overall pick. Okay, he had Derek Brown in defensive tackle, but let's face facts. We're all going to be honest. Dexter Lawrence is 10 times a player that Derek Brown is. So, you know, he's not going to kind of, you know, worry about that kind of thing. He's got a better player next to him. And then obviously opposite him, he's had Hassan Reddick in the past years. But again, Thibodeaux is younger, hopefully going to be a better player. So hopefully he'll flourish here in New York. He was double teamed on 15% of his pass rush attempts. And, you know, considering the teams threw the ball just 481 times against the Panthers all season, it doesn't kind of give him many opportunities to do what he can, and that's rush the quarterback. Due to this, his stats for 2023 were among the worst of his career, but, you know, like I said, don't let that kind of be a reflection on him as a player. So just breaking down his stats, he had 40 pressures, which tied him for 53rd in the league, with 21 hurries at tied at 69th. 10 quarterback hits, which was good enough for being tied 27th in the league, with 9 sacks, which tied him for 28th. 32 stops tied him for 23rd, and then 30 solo tackles, which tied him for 34th. So, you know, kind of not stats that kind of jump off the page, and, you know, not the stats that get Giants fans excited about him, as I probably am excited as what he could potentially do in this scheme with the players he'll be playing alongside. Now, in regards to the addition of Burns, it does give opposing teams a headache. You know, you can't double team Dex, Tibbs, and Burns all at the same time. You know, you only allowed 5 offensive linemen. I know it feels like the Giants only ever play with 1 or 2 due to how poor our O-line is. But, you know, you only allowed 5, and if you want to chuck a tight end in there to block as well, then you get 6. But you can't double team everybody. So this is going to allow Bowen to continue his mantra of putting edge rushers on an island outside of the tackles, which is something Burns did on the majority of his snaps last season. Now, Brandon Olsen from SI.com did mention that Bowen may utilise Burns like he did Landry, meaning that we may see him drop into coverage on exotic blitzes. But again, on term of exotic blitzes, we might see him occasionally, but probably nowhere near what we saw with our last DC for the last 2 years in Wink Martindale. Now, despite the low costing trade capital, Burns has been given a considerable contract. And with the amount of money that he's now being paid, it's natural to expect big things from him. How much will he be judged on his individual stats, or should we really be looking at the whole unit as a bigger picture, Craig?
Yes, I guess we kind of inadvertently covered this with Thibodeaux, but yeah, I do think that after being as poor as we have been for so long, with only really having one player be good in a particular sort of position group, we've very rarely over the last few years had multiple standouts in a position group. It would be nice just to see 2 players really hit the ground running. So for me, I'd like to look at the whole unit as a defensive front and look at Dex and look at Tibbs and look at Burns and see, you know, big numbers on pressures, big numbers on stats, but not for individuals, for across the team, and really kind of hand that out between them. Kev, not sure if, I know we like we said, we just spoke about this kind of with Tibbs, but are you on the same sort of page there?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, I want to see like a group stat of like low running yards, low passing yards, you know, pressures from everyone. I mean, like, Burns hasn't really had the stats that jump out over his career, but again, as I said before, he passed the eye test. He is a phenomenal pass rusher in this league, and I think working opposite Thibodeaux will only be benefit to both of them. So again, it's you know, individual stats are fantastic, but you know, I want teams to be scoring less than 15 points on us, on our defense. I want run stats to be down. I want passing stats to be down. I want sacks to be up. I want, like I said, like a team, the more team stats sort of stand out.
Yeah, and obviously we've just gone through 2 big names there. There is one player who was on the team last year who was, you know, a number 1 and has now been relegated probably to more of a backup role, and that's Azeez Ojulari. Now, Azeez only appeared in 11 games last year in what was another season disrupted by injury. Stop us if you've heard this before. Unlike his 2022 season, where despite only playing limited games, he was able to contribute, when available last year, it wasn't up to standard. I don't know if it was just me. Azeez looked lethargic, maybe even disinterested at times. Maybe that was because he was being hampered by the injury, came back too early. We'll never know. But he finished with 2.5 sacks and 16 tackles on an entire season. I mean, 11 games is just really not good enough. If you look at his sort of overalls there, 25 pressures, tied 81st, 17 hurries, tied 77th, 5 QB hits, tied 65th. Those 2.5 sacks, PFF counts them as 3, so just as kind of like an offshoot. Earlier when we were talking about Thibodeaux, 11.5 sacks, PFF counts them as 13. Don't know why. Don't know why they can't live in halves. It's not difficult. It's only 0.5. Stops, Azeez had 12, tied 97th, 11 solo tackles, tied 105th for edge rushers. It's just not really good enough. Now, due to the signing of Burns, he's going to be pegged down to that situational backup after being a starter on the depth chart for the last 2 seasons. Hamstring and groin injuries have caused him to miss 16 games over the last 2 seasons, which is almost an entire season. That does mean that the rest could almost be a good thing, and he can manage his body better and hopefully stay healthy. However, with this being a contract year for him, if he doesn't manage to stay healthy, this is the end of the road, really. It's just how it's going to go. Kev, another pass rusher who was on the team last year. Let's have a Boogie.
Boogie Basham. Oh, yeah. He was acquired in a trade with the Bills last offseason with the hope that his size, athleticism would see him become a quality depth piece. Unfortunately, we never saw that side of him due to lack of explosiveness on the edge and production. The Giants opted to give Jihad Ward, Hadi, more snaps. He was a healthy scratch from weeks 12 to 16 and finished the season recording 0 tackles for loss, just 11 total tackles and no pass rushing stats. The expectations now for Basham will be up against it this offseason. However, a change in defensive coordinator and scheme could give him a new opportunity. Like we said before, he needs to be a flash quickly and early through as a poor off season could see his times with the Giants end, although he's another player that was name dropped by Bowen earlier on in the Hard Knocks, and he could maybe play more of that NASCAR inside package type thing, pass rushing from the inside. But those are 2 players who barely contribute to the team, almost seem happy just to be along for the ride, especially last year. Are you concerned about the veteran depth behind the premier edge rusher, Shane?
A little bit, yeah, because obviously Azeez, like it's been mentioned, he's always had them injury problems. In terms of Boogie, I mean, yeah, he got name dropped, but then he did also get name dropped on Shane Bowen's introductory meeting. Obviously, we then went and acquired Brian Burns. So, obviously that's going to play a part in it. I mean, it's a shame with Azeez's injuries because I do like him as a player. I think he's a fantastic player. He's a really, I'd even go as far to say he's probably a better pass rusher than Tibbs in terms of getting to the quarterback. He just can't stay fit. And, like it's been mentioned many times before, the best ability is availability. And that's where Azeez has always had these kind of problems. I'd love nothing more than to see Azeez put up double-digit sacks and earn that second contract with the Giants and, get over them injury problems once and for all. But hopefully Tibbs and Burns can stay fit and they're only going to be coming out of games, give them a breather for 2 or 3 plays and then get them back in there. And it's going to be nothing kind of serious if they do have to come out of any games.
Yeah, and your thoughts, Craig?
Yeah, Shane's pretty much, hit the nail on the head there. Because Thibodeaux played so many snaps last year, and take nothing away, he had 900 plus snaps, which is phenomenal. It's only 4th on the team, but bear in mind we had 2 players play every single snap on defense, so it kind of masks that number a little bit. Almost hitting, 1,000 snaps is incredible for durability's sake, especially seeing as Tibbs had a injury hit rookie season. Now, if Burns and Thibodeaux stay fit for the entire season, I only want to see them rotated if they're out of breath and just need a couple of seconds, really. So I'm not too concerned because I feel like you're never going to, touch wood, injuries, you're never really going to have, hopefully, Burns and Thibodeaux out of the game at the same time. You're always going to have one. And I think that kind of like the Dexter Lawrence thing, that's a good thing for the defense. So veteran depth behind it doesn't concern me quite as much because there is something there. But, Azeez and Boogie are both still young in themselves. They're not really like vets like Jordon Phillips is. So 3 more players. I'm just going to fire through these very quickly, just for the sort of sake of time. Tomon Fox is up first. Now, another member of the 2022 roster that saw their playing time in 2023 absolutely slashed. After being waived by the Giants in August, he was re-signed to the practice squad where he remained until week 16. He was called up for a sole outing of the season for the game against the Eagles, recording 1 tackle in 19 snaps. Fox was already struggling to get game time. The addition of Burns means that his path to the roster looks even tougher. He may need to target the 2 vets to get a backup job, but even then, he couldn't best Basham in a poor season. What is he going to have to show this offseason to show that that's going to make any difference? Benton Whitley, it wasn't an ideal sophomore season for Benton, as he began the season on the Vikings before being waived and re-signed to the practice squad. He was elevated for the week 1 game against the Bucks, and they gave him 1 snap. Thanks for coming. In late November, the Giants signed him, and then he would play 13 snaps between week 12 and week 15, recording a single batted pass, and then that was it. Expectations for Benton, like Fox, Whitley may struggle to force his way onto the roster and might have to just settle for a practice squad job. And now the last one, where I am going to do a Dan and probably butcher a name, but that's how we go. Ovie Oghoufo. That's how I'm going to go with it. Come on, Kev, show me up.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Ovie Oghoufo.
Oghoufo. Right, Oghoufo transferred to LSU for his final year of eligibility after 2 years at Texas, but due to the Tigers' edge rotation, he saw a drop-off in snaps. This, coupled with LSU having one of the worst coach defenses in college football last season, meant that it was a bit of a testing season for Ovie. When he did see the field, he was asked to play the jack position, meaning that he would drop into coverage more often than the other rushers on the team. Despite this, he did still manage to record a 74.9 grade in run defense. Now, expectations, all signs point to this being a pickup based on potential rather than impact to the roster straight away. Due to this, we'll likely see him end up on the practice squad while he develops, with the potential of seeing him play a little bit part depending on elevations and stuff like that. Now,
actually started his career at Notre Dame.
Yes, he did. I was going to mention that. Didn't play a lot of snaps from what I was looking at, though. Was kind of like a bit of a rotational player. I'm guessing.
Some say he moved on to bigger and better schools.
Just because draft season is done does not mean that the shots stop.
Yeah, turn away, Kevin. I'll take that note for you back, mate.
Right, Shane, will you stitch yourself up for this question then?
Oh, great.
The Dable Joe Shane Giants have historically had 10 linemen on the roster. 2022, it was an equal 5-5 split between defensive tackles and edge rushers. Last season, 4 edge, 6 tackles. Due to the depth, are we looking at another season where we carry less edge rushers and try and block up the middle again?
I'm going to go with yeah. And the reason I say that is because I think if you go back to, I mean, we keep saying it, but you go back to Shane Bowen's introductory meeting in episode 1, he kind of emphasised about the trenches being important. And I think that's why we'll probably look to keep more there, along with the fact that, if you've got more D tackles in it, hopefully it'll take the pressure off Dex a little bit. Because, he's constantly being looked on and relied on and double teamed, and we need to give him a break. So if we've got a few more tackles, we can maybe put in a rotational piece, and one of them develops like we've mentioned, then hopefully it'll give Dex a little bit of a break as well. But yeah, all good. We'll carry more D tackles.
Kev?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously the edge rushers are all but more about speed off the edge, trying to get around the edge, whereas the big boys clog up the middle, and you've got 330, 350 pound lads sort of leaning on you all game. You need a bit more of a rotation there. I mean, something like Boogie Basham will I think maybe give a bit of he might make the roster because he can be asked to do a little bit of both. But again, this is where practice squad landing on the practice squad would be huge. Because a lot of times you will get called up for these positions.
Yeah, and let's just emphasise that the practice squad isn't a dirty word. Like, we say this quite a lot, but it's not a dirty word. They do some really important work, and it's also key for development. The only way they're going to learn is by getting reps. If those reps are against the ones, drawing up game time, trying to pretend to be the opposition, you're going to learn more. And you're still in the room with the rest of the veterans. You're still going to pick up the nuances from watching tape and everything. So let's not pretend that just because we're saying a player is only good enough for the practice squad means that they're a bad player. Just means that they need a little bit of help and they just need to learn some nuances there. Right. There we go. A long one. 1 hour 30 on the dot there. I think that's pretty good. Shane's background in Germany has gone from day to dusk to pitch black. So we'll let him get back on the beers shortly. And unfortunately, that is all the time we have this week. We will be back next week on Wednesday as we continue our look at the defense by looking at linebackers and safeties, plus Hard Knocks episode 3. If we can find somewhere to watch it before the show airs, with it being on Tuesday, it's a shorter turnaround. So hopefully we will be able to do that. Anything you want to add before we go, guys?
No, it's just good to finally get back on with you guys. I feel like I should be saying thank you for having me as a guest. It's been that long. I'm not on next week's episode. Hopefully, it's not going to be another month before you. Neil C, special guest. That's how long it's been. I don't even have a name tag come up anymore now when I join. Like, these guys just don't recognise me. But yeah, I'm not going to be on next week's episode due to work commitments. Hopefully it won't be another month before I'm back on. But you guys have been doing a fantastic job while I've not been able to listen to a few episodes as well. So the content's constantly there all the time.
Yeah, great to have you back, mate. And I hope you're scouting over there for our trip in November when we go over and give us some ideas of what beer houses to go to when we go. But the Hard Knock stuff's brilliant. It's such a good insight. We crying out for more content like this for years, and we're finally getting it now, and it's brilliant. Another 3 episodes. Let's enjoy them. It's filled up this offseason massively, but also like looking at the team and looking where we stand as from a roster projection is really, really good as well. Like I really enjoyed this breaking down the players, seeing like where we stand, where maybe we could tweak the roster comes cut days, but also there's some savvy vets out there who might start to look to like Jamal Adams just signed for Tennessee today. So these vets are going to start looking at teams now because we're going to start coming back for camps soon. So you might see some additions. So just keep your ears to the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. Simmons is still available, who was on the Broncos, and Pinnock and Nubin could do with a veteran presence in there. So just earmarking that one for Craig's wants right there. But you're right. We're getting ever closer to. I think it's mere weeks away, isn't it, until the return now, and be plenty of open practices there for the fans, and we might even be trying to cook up something a little special to happen from training camp as well. As always, remember to like this video, subscribe to us on YouTube. You can hit the bell at the bottom to be notified when we are live, and if you're not already, follow us at the socials in the description down below. My thanks, as ever, go to Shane and to Kev for joining me. To all of you watching or listening, we're signing off until next time. Let's go Giants, and it's coming home.